Okay, imagine getting a call from someone saying there's been an issue at one of your rental properties. Don't worry, no one's been hurt, but the police are involved and your tenants have been arrested, and we're going to figure out the next steps. Now, that's exactly what happened to me one time, but because I was using a property manager, it was actually that property manager who gave us the call to let us know there's an issue at your property, law enforcement's involved, but I have it handled. So that's my example of one of the instances where a property manager was incredibly valuable to us because I was on a trip to go celebrate a milestone birthday. We were already 5 hours into our drive. We had tickets to go to different shows. We were celebrating in different ways. And so to be able to continue on our trip, knowing that we had a very trusted property manager managing everything back home, and that there wasn't any immediate danger to our tenants, to the neighborhood, and to our property, that we could continue on and know that our property manager was handling everything. So that's why I always talk about, a property manager, it might seem, what's the point of this if all I'm doing is paying them 10% of my rent every month and I've had a long-term tenant? Is this really worth it? Well, in this situation, it was a long-term tenant, and we were kind of at that situation or experience of like, oh, we're just paying them monthly to collect the rent every month, everything's fine. But the amount of work that the property manager spent handling this situation well covered all of that percentage of rent up until that date, and still we're so grateful for how it was managed. So I want to tell you a little bit about what actually happened and what the next steps were. So we own property in Oregon, and I want to be a little sensitive talking about this because it does deal with a health issue, and so I definitely want to be respectful of recognizing that it was a mental health issue that we were dealing with, but it did cause property damage and some violent behavior. So we had to act in order to protect the other residents of the neighborhood, protect our tenants, and protect the property. And so we had a long-term tenant, 10 years, paid rent, everything was fine. It was a husband and wife. They had some other kids in their household. Everything was great. Well, unbeknownst to us, the couple had separated. The wife had moved down to a different state, and it was just the father and an adult son living in the property. At the time, when the original lease was signed, it was minors were living at the house, but 10 years, people grow up and change. So it was a father and son living in this property. The woman who had originally signed the lease, not involved anymore. And from what we have deduced from it, there was a psychotic episode that happened where both the father and son were experiencing some paranoia symptoms. They became pretty worried about their safety and became violent with and damaging the house. So they ripped out light fixtures looking for wires. They went up into the ceiling or the attic space, the crawl spaces, pulling out insulation. They ripped the sink off the wall. They ripped the toilet off the wall, all because they were experiencing an episode where they thought that they were under surveillance, where they were at a danger, and that they were looking in the house for cameras and surveillance equipment. And what are some of the other things they did? I think they were trying to get into the drywall. So they had taken kitchen knives and were slicing the drywall, trying to break into it in different spots. They were taking shingles off the roof, and we weren't there, but from the accounts from the neighbors were that it was a very loud situation, and that's why the cops were called. The cops deemed that the tenants were being dangerous to themselves because there was weapons involved. And so that's when they were arrested. And that's when our property manager got the call from the police to be like, here's the situation. You need to notify the homeowners. And that's when our property manager called us. But he worked with law enforcement. He worked with the tenants. That's when he contacted the original lease signee to be like, what's going on? She's like, oh, here's the deal. She had no idea that there was an issue with her family that she had left back or that was at the house still, that were causing these issues. And so that's when our property manager had to act. So I believe this happened about 8 years ago. I'll link in the bottom of the description. Also, I wrote a blog article about this probably closely after when it happened. I think it was talking about inspections and the value of property management at that time. So there might be more details in that article, but because it was a violent act and there's danger to the tenants were being dangerous and there's intense property damage, we were able to serve a notice that said it wasn't even a cure or quit. I think it was like, you are going to get evicted because this is dangerous behavior. And we tried to work with the tenants, find out what was going on. But then there was another episode where it was clear that these tenants were not going to be able to live safely in this house and be safe residents for the neighborhood. So our property manager worked with them to move forward with an eviction proceeding. I don't believe that we actually had to go to court for eviction. I think they left voluntarily, which was a nice bonus. I even think they did not take, we had to have, they didn't take a lot of their stuff. So then we had to go through the next step, which was the cleanup step. And there was so much damage to the house caused by these tenants. And I think they deemed that there was asbestos in the property because it was an older property. So then it became this whole level of damage control to remove the items to then go in and repair it. But our property manager handled it all. He worked with contractors. We had to contact our insurance. Our actual insurance covered a lot because we had the right landlord insurance policy. So they covered a lot of the repairs that happened. And they also covered lost rent, our insurance did at that time. So it was like everything worked out in the way that we had set up our rental management so that we had the right resources to help us in the situation. Our property manager understood Oregon law. He worked with law enforcement. He handled everything right to make sure that everything was handled appropriately and safely. But it is one of the most intense rental stories that we've personally ever had to deal with. We usually have like really good renters. We really appreciate our renters for respecting the properties, following rules. But we really couldn't have done this without our property manager, who really showed us that he understood his job and he took care of us. And so that's when I say there's so much value in property management for helping us manage our own rental properties in a way that is very passive. So some rental property investors like to be really involved. You know, they're going to self-manage. They're going to be their boots on the ground. They're working with their tenants. They don't mind going to court for evictions. They don't mind serving those 72-hour notices to vacate. But for a rental property investor who wants to be really passive, working with the property managers, paying that 7 to 10% monthly of the rental income, that is where the value is. So that's something that you can always think about when you're thinking about where is my value in property management. And this story can be shared with a landlord and with property managers to show like, this is why you pay me to work with you and help you manage your rental properties. My name is Casey Miller. I work with Rentec Direct property management software. As you can tell, I'm a landlord. I'm a real estate investor. I worked in the industry for over a decade, and I'm always happy to share personal stories and advice about what it's like to own rental property and manage them and work with your tenants and have great landlord-tenant relationships. Come and visit me on the Rentec Direct blog and like and subscribe for more videos about what it's like to be a landlord and to provide great property management services.